everybody. I'm here at the Georgia Aquarium with Dr. Buddo, who is the Director of External Engagement. So I have a few questions for you today.
Fire away.
A lot of your peer-reviewed publications actually discuss invasive species such as the lionfish. How did you get involved with studying invasive species, and what continues to captivate you with them?
Well, I can tell you this. I was always captivated by marine biology and new things. So I went to my professor's office when I finished my bachelor's degree. I said, I want to do research. What can I research on? And he handed me this jar with a green mussel. And he said, we found it last week.
Wow.
We don't know what it is, where it's from, what it's doing here. We need to figure it out. I said, here you go. That's how it started. So we had to figure out what it was, that it was an invasive species, and the ecological and biological impacts. And that just excited me because it was never done in Jamaica or for that much in the Caribbean before.
Wow.
So I like to be at the forefront, at the cutting edge, developing new things, and that just excited me. My curiosity in figuring out why this was here and what it was doing, and how a species from somewhere else could establish in somewhere brand new and just take over.
Wow.
And that was what fascinated me about that.
That is so cool. So I've heard from a lot of scientists that it's actually okay to eat lionfish and that they actually taste good. So have you eaten one before?
Many.
Did it taste good?
You know, really, really good. And that's what's one of the positive things about that. Using an invasive species and turn it into a consumption kind of fad actually help the control of invasive species. You know, we're lucky that it actually tastes good. So earlier on in the invasion, we had a lot of training, a lot of sensitization with the public, because it is a venomous fish.
Yeah.
So trying to convince someone to eat something that they've never seen before and it's venomous, and no, you can eat it. You know, we have to do a lot of it. So I have to take off my lab coat, put on an apron and a chef hat, and go on TV and go on in the public domain and really tell people, hey, you can remove the venomous spines and it's just like any other fish.
Oh, wow.
So that was exciting. People caught on to it. There were cooking competitions and celebrities got involved, and that helped because once the public is involved, it makes control so much better.
Oh wow, that sounds awesome. Okay, so now I actually have to go
You
and
have
try some lionfish.
Really good. Lionfish ceviche, I think, is the best.
Ceviche, okay. I love ceviche too, so that's just perfect. So for our next question, you've worked in academia for quite some time. How was the transition from academia to corporate positions in the sciences, such as here at the Georgia Aquarium?
Well, for me personally, it was a welcoming. Being in academia, I was always struggling with, I've done all this research on this science, what can we do with it?
How to apply it?
How to apply it. And to be able to be in a position where I can do science and apply science for the greater good, that's what gets me going. So moving from academia into a position where you can actually take it and use it, that's awesome for me.
That's fantastic. Wow.
So it was not a bad, it was not a hard transition for me to do from academia into nonprofits or any other organization.
That's really awesome. So you're actually the Director of External Engagement, which means you're responsible for strengthening ties to the local community.
Yes.
How exactly do you accomplish this?
Well, you know, the first approach is, what does the community need? You know, it's not what we want. What does the community need, and how can we at Georgia Aquarium help to facilitate that? There is need for research, conservation, education, and those three things are our mandates anyway.
Yeah.
So looking at those and trying to tie those together to advance the community's needs. And when I talk about communities, I'm not only talking about the Atlanta community or the Georgia community, I'm talking about communities worldwide. We're all connected by the ocean.
Yeah.
And so each local community, doesn't matter where you are, we are all connected. And we share similar problems, and we do come up with similar solutions. But sometimes we don't really know them because we're not communicating as well. So kind of pulling things together and getting Georgia Aquarium out there even more than what we've been doing all these years, it's quite exciting.
It sounds exciting. Do you have any exciting projects you can tell us about?
Sure. You know, we're trying to establish more marine protected areas.
Okay.
Worldwide. The world is going towards 30% marine protection by 2030. Many countries are struggling to figure out, where do I put my marine protected area? Which area is worthy of protection? What are the ingredients for that area to be protected? You can't just protect everywhere and expect everything to come back. If it doesn't have the right ingredients, it probably won't work. So that's one of the things that is exciting for us for 2022. We want to start helping countries to establish marine protected areas even more than we've been doing it before.
That's really awesome. Can community members like myself get involved with these projects?
Of course, it's not. It's community driven.
Okay.
There's no marine protected area in the world that works without the community. The community actually drives it. So every time I set up a marine protected area anywhere, I sit down with the community on day one. Do you have a problem with fishing, for example? Is your fish stocks going down? What do you want to do about it? Do you want to do something about it? What do you think you should do about it? That's how we start the conversation. We don't want to have an approach where I'm going to fly in, mark out an area, and say, you must protect that. You cannot take any fish from that ever. That will never work.
Right.
So it has to be community driven. We have to be very tightly involved.
Wow, that's really awesome. So say I wanted to get involved. How would I go about getting involved then? Who can I contact or reach out to?
Well, you can contact the Georgia Aquarium, the Research and Conservation team. You can contact myself as well. There's so many projects that we're doing here at Georgia Aquarium that people want to be involved and can get involved in those projects. Just reach out. We're very, very accessible. And we're always willing to spend some time and speak to anyone about research and conservation and education as well.
That's really fantastic. So as a minority in the marine science field in the West Indies, what was your experience like?
As a child growing up in Jamaica, we were always afraid of the ocean. Not me. I wanted to be a marine biologist, but my parents were never allowing me to go into the water because the fear of drowning on islands. Wanted to be a marine biologist, couldn't swim, was not allowed to swim or even learn to swim until I got to about 20 years old. I said, no, enough of this. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to teach myself to swim.
Oh, wow.
And 3 months after that, I became a certified diver.
Whoa.
Because I wanted to be a marine biologist. And as a minority in a place like this where our viewpoint of a marine biologist is very different than what I'm seeing around me and my peers and what I look at myself. But that's changing. And I'm happy that it's changing now. I also teach scuba diving, and I teach 10-year-olds and certify them for divers because I don't want them to become like me, waiting until 20 years old to put a mask on and explore the deep. I want them to start doing that from their 10 years old.
That's incredible.
Give them a head start.
We actually, this past weekend, we were able to send 4 non-divers down to Pompano Beach, Florida, and get them certified with the help of Patty. And it was just an awesome experience watching them, seeing all the pictures. And by the time this premieres, you guys will see them and everything. So we've got 4 new certified Patty scuba divers. And so my last question for you. What is one piece of advice you can give an aspiring minority scientist trying to enter into the field of marine science? Science in general?
I would say decide early what kind of scientist you would like to be, and hold on to that. That's your core. If you wanted to be a scientist that we want to have impact, hold on to that. What do I want to be? What kind of scientist I want to be recognized as in 15 years' time, 20 years' time? Chart that course forward. I would say get involved. It's very hard for you to, I want a job here, and you get it. I volunteered so much. I still volunteer. Spend some time, find some graduate students. Hey, I can come and carry your equipment for you. No problem, no cost. You don't even have to feed me. I bring my own lunch. I used to do that because I wanted to be immersed in it, right? I had nothing to give. I didn't know anything at that point, but I knew I wanted to be a marine biologist. Let me go and sit down with these graduate students. Let me go into the field with them. And that's how it works. Give. Find an organization, find students, find universities. I want to come and help. Get involved. And you can decide at that point, this may not be the career for me. And I've had some of those interns come work with me. This is not the career for me. But you may find an opportunity where you say, no, this is exactly what I want to do. this kind of science, this kind of research, this is what I want to be. That helps. So that's why I think all young persons interested in science should start. Get involved. Go spend your Saturday doing things.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to speak with us today.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Dr. Who's. I'm Tia. I'm a second-year master's student at the University of Georgia, and I'm here to interview you at the Georgia Aquarium. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks, Tia, for having us. We're real excited for you guys to be here.
I'm excited to do our interview. So would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. I'm Dr. Lisa Hoops. I'm the Director of Research, Conservation, and Nutrition, which I know is a big old mouthful, but I wear a couple of hats here in the aquarium.
You got to in this day. So I have a few interview questions for you.
Great.
So how about we talk about aquarium diets and nutrition? Like, what led you to this particular niche?
Yeah, that's a great question because it is a very unique niche. There aren't many nutritionists at public aquariums. And so I really slid into this position kind of sideways. I had never intended to be a nutritionist. It wasn't really on my radar when I was in graduate school. I did my PhD on energetics, and this really interesting opportunity arose after I finished my PhD to study nutrition and clinical nutrition at another aquarium. And I took that opportunity because really energetics is the end result of either good or bad nutrition. So the two tie together really lovely. And I went and took the leap and found that it really was a niche that I was interested in and something a lot of people hadn't explored. After I finished that postdoc, I came here to Georgia Aquarium. And I've been here ever since, so 11 years now, and part of what interests me about aquatic nutrition is that we don't know a whole lot about it. So the field is really wide open and lots of opportunity to learn and apply that knowledge to this really interesting collection of animals that we have here.
Yes, I know. I bet you're excited about doing this, especially with the sharks.
Yep.
This is a newer exhibit.
Yep, it's one of my favorites, for sure.
So what's the most interesting food item that any of the animals eat here?
Great question. We have a whole variety of food options here to feed what is a very diverse aquatic collection, but we do have some terrestrial things here in the building too. So we do have things like crickets and mealworms, rats and mice for some of our snakes. But one of the more interesting things that we bring in is kelp, live kelp, for not only our sea otters for enrichment, but also to feed some of our smaller invertebrates. So that's probably one of the strangest things that we might bring into the building. So we work really hard to make sure that we have a great diversity of food items for our collection animals to keep them living long and very healthy and happy lives. So we kind of go to the ends of the world to make sure that we're getting everything we need for a very complete diet.
We always got to get the best for our animals.
That's right.
And then next, I'm sure this question is on everyone's mind. Do you prevent smaller animals in the exhibit from getting eaten by some of the predators? Like I know in here we've seen some of the smaller fish. So I was like actually kind of curious about that myself.
Yeah, so that is also a really great question. We get asked it all the time. So how do we keep bigger things from eating smaller things in the exhibit? Well, we do our best to give them a very complete diet and to feed them at the frequency at which they would feed in the wild, so they really don't feel the need to snack, if you will, on something else in the exhibit. We also have strategies for moving some of the smaller fish around in the exhibit. Here in the sharks gallery, you'll notice that those false pilchards school up real nice, so it's hard for the sharks to kind of get in there and pick any one of them off. We do have feeding strategies in some of our other galleries where we'll kind of concentrate the feed for the fish down into the tunnels, and that helps keep them more protected from some of the other species in the exhibit. So it's really a combination of things, keeping everybody appropriately fed and also moving some of the fish around into other spots where they're a little more protected. So we have a lot of different strategies to help us do that.
That's really cool. And usually help me stop snacking.
We'll talk after.
And then how often are the diets actually changed for the animals at the aquarium?
Yeah, that's so the diets are reviewed at least annually for most animals, but often more frequently depending on what's going on. So if we have an animal that looks thin or looks a little bit too robust, that's a kind way to say fat, then we can work with our animal care teams and our animal health teams to really work on adjusting the diet and either trimming back calories or increasing calories that they're consuming. When we have animals that go through growth spurts, right, we need to adjust calorie intake to support the muscle building that goes with growth. And then as animals kind of move into geriatric phases of their life, sometimes we have to adjust diets there to really accommodate how they digest food and some health issues that they may be facing. So we're constantly adjusting diets and reevaluating based on the needs of the animal.
It's amazing. Do you ever like change the diets based on what they would normally have in the wild, like seasonally?
Yeah, we try very hard to mimic a wild diet. That's really the goal of a nutritionist, is to mimic the wild diet when we know it. And that's really the challenge for a lot of the species that we house. We really don't know much about what they eat in the wild. What are their vitamin requirements? So I say this all the time: how much vitamin A does a manta ray need? Because I'm the one that has to make that decision, right? And I don't know what that is in the wild. And so we can work on clues based on other species, and we can sample some of the diet items that they eat in the wild and see how much vitamin A is in their food. And that helps inform, you know, the decisions that we make on supplementation and how to provide a balanced diet. But it's hard for some of those species that we don't know a lot about. So we use a lot of guesswork, and a lot of sleuthing in the literature.
What's science without guess? A little guesswork at times.
That's right.
Right, and then final question: when you have a pregnant animal, how drastically does their diet change throughout their gestation period?
It depends on the species that we're talking about. So for mammals, that can be quite dramatic, and most of that dietary shift happens very late in the gestation, and more so after birth, post-parturition. So for marine mammals, they have to produce a really high-fat milk in order to support the calf or their young, the pup. And so their caloric needs really double right after birth because they have to put all of that energy into the milk. Some other species, like sharks and rays, they don't really have a lot of maternal care post-birth. And so we have to adjust the diet maybe slightly toward the end of the pregnancy phase in order to have more maternal investment into the eggs and then the pups. But once they give birth, that's usually it, and they go right back to their normal diets. So it just depends on the species and you know, what type of birth they're giving, whether they're having to support milk for a young or they're just releasing the pups and that's the end. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was great hearing how all this works and what you're doing and how important your job is here.
Thanks so much. Really nice to meet you, and excited for you guys to visit today.
Hey, Dr. Dove.
How you doing?
Nice to meet you. Finally, we connected on Twitter. It's finally nice to meet a fellow Al in person. So yeah, like I said, I'm Alex. Can you tell us a little about yourself as the Vice President of Science and Education here at the aquarium?
Sure, and it's great to meet you too, and I'm really glad you guys were able to come today. So yeah, I've been at Georgia Aquarium for 15 years now. I came shortly after opening, and I've been involved in a number of different aspects of the operation. But these days I oversee research conservation programs, education programs, nutrition and institutional development, even our military recognition programs. We have military programs here as well. So I get to oversee all of that and participate in the leadership team and help set the strategic direction for the place.
Okay, thank you. That's awesome. I was able to come to the aquarium within the first months of its opening, and it's actually where I saw my first trout. My last name is Troutman, and I didn't see my first trout until I came to the aquarium. So it was pretty cool to see a native species here in the aquarium.
Well, it was one of the things that we really wanted to achieve at the beginning, which was to give the people of Atlanta a chance to experience something that they can't normally see. I mean, the sorts of sharks that you can see behind us here, for someone who lives in Atlanta to see those, you have to drive at least 4 hours, 5 hours to the coast. Then the water clarity ain't so hot off the Georgia coast, so even seeing these animals is not going to be an experience like this. So the chance to create relationships for people with animals that they wouldn't normally get to see is the whole reason that we do what we do, and to take those moments and use them to inspire people for conservation.
Yes, we definitely thank you for that. And I can verify that the water on the Georgia coast is not clear. I do my research down near Brunswick, and while it's beautiful, the water's not like in the Gulf and blue. It's that silty brown.
Right. So it's a two-edged sword though, right? Because those animals are also somewhat protected by the fact that you can't see them, so people don't know that they're there. People don't realize that there are tiger sharks off the coast of Georgia, and that they actually probably breed in the shallow waters of South Carolina. So there are amazing things happening in the ocean right off the coast here, but a lot of it's out of sight, so it's kind of out of mind. And they get a little bit of protection from that, but also awareness is low, right? So one of our jobs is to help people understand that these amazing things are happening in the ocean.
Yes, thank you for that. So we can say there's beauty in the darkness.
It sure is.
All right, next question. So, what are some ways you are engaging the Atlanta and Georgia community into science and education here at the aquarium?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one of the things that I love the most. I started in academia, and I was frustrated sometimes that my science was sort of ending in peer-reviewed journals, but then there was something missing. There was no caboose on the train, right? So the last part of it was missing. And so for me, one of the most satisfying things is to reach people with this information and so to share some of the passion that we have. And when I come to work every day and get to work with animals like these, I want other people to feel a little bit of that in their day. And I discovered social media for that. Getting to be a long time ago now, but originally I was a blogger. I used to write very carefully thought out long blog posts, and then I had kids and I changed to Twitter where 140 characters was about all I could manage. So these days I've found talking to people directly with social media was the best way to share passion for what's going on in marine science, and it's quick too. One of the other things about science is it's kind of slow, right? The whole publication cycle takes a long time. Grant treadmills take a long time. Social media is instantaneous, and so when we've seen something amazing or had a fantastic experience or discovered something really cool, we can share that with people on the spot, and that sort of immediacy is really hard to beat, and so that's one of the things that drives me in my science communication efforts.
That's awesome. Yeah, Twitter has definitely opened up more of the science world to the, not really the regular world, but the world in general. It's not hidden behind a paywall, or you have to go down and find that book that's in your basement. You can say, like, you know what, it's in my mind right here. I can tweet it out for all the world to see. So I definitely am thankful for Twitter and thankful for scientists like you that are engaging with others through the internet and social media.
It's adding other people to the conversation who weren't there before. I mean, right now, Black and Marine Science Week is happening, so there's a lot of people all over Twitter talking about the way we represent people in marine science, and we're all looking forward to a day when marine science looks less like me and more like us, and then we can all participate and share in the wonders of the ocean and the conservation thereof.
Right, yes, exactly. That's exactly what Black and Marine Science is looking to do, is to make the scientific field, the marine scientific field, more representative of what the ocean looks like, the world looks like. It's not just one species or one particular color fish, but it's a wide array of different fish organisms that make up the whole ocean. So that should be conveyed in the scientific world. There's a lot of different people of different backgrounds that makes up the world, so the scientific world should reflect that. And so that's one thing that Black Marine Science is trying to do.
I'm really thrilled about that, especially in a city like Atlanta with the history that we have and the makeup that we have. If you can't talk about the way representation occurs in marine science in a city like Atlanta, where can you talk about it?
Right, exactly. Atlanta is where it's greater. All right, next question. So, we see you are an avid diver. What has been one of your favorite dive locations and why?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me that. So I have a favorite place to dive, and it's this place called Darwin's Arch. It's in the Galapagos, which is a set of islands about 800 miles off the coast of Ecuador in the eastern tropical Pacific. It's kind of remote, kind of hard to get to, but once you get there, it is amazing. It is this incredible stone arch that sticks up out of the ground. Sticks up out of the ocean. Unfortunately, the arch fell down last year, so now it's these two stone pillars, but at the bottom of these pillars, if you drop into the ocean, you go into the highest shark density pretty much anywhere in the world. They have all manner of sharks. We usually have at least hundreds of hammerhead sharks on every dive, and every now and then, usually about every second or third dive, you will see the largest whale sharks known anywhere in the world, We've seen whale sharks there that are 45 feet long, size of one of those big yellow school buses. And when you see an animal like that coming out of the blue, and all of the other fish part, and this submarine of a shark goes past, it's hard not to have your mind completely blown, and to think about the fact that that's happening there all day, every day, and it was for millions of years before we showed up. That just blows my mind, and it fills me with hope that there are places like that in the ocean that you can still visit, because we hear a lot of doom and gloom about conservation stories, right? And it's easy to feel sort of conservation futility, like, well, what's the point? It's all, it's all going to hell. Well, it's not. There are still incredible places with incredible diversity and incredible abundance in the ocean, and we know the ocean's resilient. So when we find those places, we have to protect them, we have to celebrate them, and we have to share the stories about these places, because they are one of the things that makes living on this planet worthwhile, if you ask me.
Well, that's awesome. So I have another reason to get to Galapagos. I've been wanting to go because of darn finches and the Galapagos tours. So now I have another reason to eventually get down that way. So you talk about seeing this magnificent giant creature of the whale shark. What's your thought when you see it, especially how big it is compared to you? What goes through your mind? Is it just pure amazement, or what are you thinking? Because I just looking at them through the Ocean Voyager gallery, it's amazing just to see them through the window, but you're right there in the water with them. What is it like?
Yeah, so it still blows my mind after 15 years when I come to work and I realize that if I want to see the largest fish in the world, I just need to go down the hall, and it's right there, and I can see whale sharks right here in Atlanta. That's amazing to me. And it was also the first whale shark I ever saw was the ones here at Georgia Aquarium. And these days I just finished a book about whale sharks, so the opportunity to study a species like that up close has been amazing. But the ones you see in the field, there are two things that are different that I've seen in the field. Sometimes the abundance. So we did a lot of work in Mexico with a place where we get up to 400 whale sharks in the same place at the same time. Obviously that is nothing like the Ocean Voyager experience, and the chance to be among a biological event like that, it just blows your mind, and you're just sort of sitting there in the middle of it, and there are whale sharks left, right, and it fills you with awe. I mean, you can't help but feel connected to something bigger, and it inspires you, and when you come away, you're like, all right, what's next? What can we do to protect this? What can we do to spread the word about these amazing things? Because they really are sort of mind-blowing animals. And for some reason, size really influences people, right? We care more about bigger animals. It's true, for better or worse. I mean, I like really small stuff too. But whale sharks, I mean, when you're in the presence of a really big animal like that, and the majesty and the grace of an animal, it's just a lazy sweep of the tail, and the animal just kind of glides past you, and it just feels really special. And sometimes I have to remind myself, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be sciencing. So I'll get out my instruments or whatever it is that I'm supposed to be doing. But usually for a moment there, especially on the first dive of a trip, you'll be like, wow, and there's really nothing else for it but just wow.
Yes, that's awesome. I haven't seen a whale shark in a while yet, but it's on my go, and I'm just waiting for that wow moment. Even if it's just seeing it from afar, it still will be a wow moment for me. So the next question, how long have you been diving, and any tips for someone who wants to get into diving that may be afraid to jump across that broom?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Like Dr. Buddo, I didn't learn to swim until a little later. I had some ear problems when I was younger, so I taught myself to swim when I was 16, and I didn't get cleared to dive until I moved to America as an adult. So I haven't been diving nearly as long as he has. He's got thousands of dives. I've only got hundreds of dives. But it is a totally new world. And the freedom that you experience when you're diving, and the ability to go in any dimension you want. You want to go up there, you can go down there, you can go over there. And it's like flying in a dream. You ever have one of those dreams where you can fly and float around? It's just like that. And to do that and be surrounded by a bunch of other animals that are having that same experience, it really feels like a totally different world. So I say jump in, start with snorkeling. That's easy. Just put on a mask and snorkel. You can float on the surface. And then diving, as you go through the dive training process, it's so gradual that eventually, dropping down to 100 feet doesn't seem scary because you've done every depth in between, starting right at the surface. So it's a gradual process, but that first step maybe is the hardest one. And then for that one, I say just take the plunge. Put on a mask and snorkel and jump in.
Well, thank you for that. All right, next question. All right, so we talked a little bit about your amazing experience with the whale shark. What is one of the sorry. What is one of the most strangest and one of the most unique experiences you had aside from the whale shark experience?
Yeah, so there was this really special place that we visited in the South Atlantic. It's called St. Helena. It's this tiny island. It's about halfway between South Africa and Brazil. So it's smack in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean. It's one of the most remote inhabited islands in the world. And we went there to study whale sharks. And we found them, and the science was really interesting, but the place was just mind-blowing. I mean, the incredible remoteness. When we first started going there, they had no airport, so you had to go by ship. It took about 5 days each way from Cape Town. And then you find this island where there are 4,000 people with very little contact with the mainland world. But 500 years of incredible maritime history, and everybody has visited St. Helena at some point. The Dutch, the English, the Africans, the Brazilians. There are people from all over the place. There's Chinese, there's Indians. So when you meet a St. Helenian person, they could be from anywhere or everywhere. And then they are. When you look in the genetics, that you can see markers of the peoples of the world. And they've all come together on this tiny rock in the middle of the South Atlantic, where Napoleon spent his last days. Then he was exiled to St. Helena after he escaped from Elba. And he died there in 1821, and he was buried there for a while before they took his body back to France. But here's this tiny rock with this incredible historical story, and I found that part of it just really amazing. Like, the biology was really cool, amazing endemism, amazing whale sharks, but the people and the history and the social history of St. Helena was just incredible.
Oh my, that's awesome. All right, next question. So, I'm going to call you Dr. Whale Shark. Is that okay?
You can call me Al, that's fine.
Al, all right, I'll go with
Two
Al
Als.
since I'm
Yeah.
Al. So what actually led you to whale shark research?
Yeah, so, well, Ocean Voyager, plain and simple. I mean, the exhibit that we have here at Georgia Aquarium, it's the only place in the Western Hemisphere where you can come and see whale sharks in an aquarium. And it was an unparalleled opportunity. You have to take advantage of that. If you're a scientist and you have a curious mind, you have to take advantage of a chance like that to learn something about this species. I will say that I knew about the pioneering efforts of Japanese aquariums to have whale sharks at Osaka Kaiyukan Aquarium and the Okinawa Churami Aquarium in Japan, who had really pioneered the keeping of whale sharks in aquariums. And so I knew about it, but I wasn't ready to step into it until I came here. But I actually have a long history studying other things. I spent years studying lobsters before this, and before that I studied parasites and invasive species. So I think it's really the curse of the curious mind that you're always finding different things that grab your attention, and that the hardest part is to focus and be disciplined and get the science done before you get distracted by the next cool science thing over here.
So the next question is, how can someone like me or the general public, just anyone in general, get into whale shark research?
Yeah, that's a good question, because sometimes I wonder how I got into whale shark research. I mean, I was on this other path where I was studying lobsters, and there's a long story there. My wife encouraged me to move here when Georgia Aquarium got started. So it was serendipity played a big role, I have to be honest, luck and chance. But what I can say that has helped me over the years is to keep your options open and to keep your eyes on the periphery, because that's sometimes where the most interesting opportunities pop up, and you've just got to be sort of prepared. But then when you see something really cool come up, like a chance to work with whale sharks, you have to be ready to jump on it, even if it means getting completely outside your comfort zone and getting back onto the steepest part of the learning curve, which can be really tough, especially if you're just finishing grad school like you, where you've spent all this time like getting this hard-earned knowledge, right, or working your way through grad school. The idea that you would want to stay on the steepest part of the learning curve for the rest of your career, maybe not what you have in mind, but in the end, you end up looking back and thinking, wow, look at all that stuff we did that was really cool. And it was because you were willing to get out of your comfort zone and try something different. So I encourage grad students in particular, not to get too hung up on the topic of their research, but rather the skill set. Learn about the critical thinking, learn how to do critical literature evaluations, pick up portable skills. If you're a biologist, maybe things like molecular biology, or GIS skills or some coding. God, I wish I knew how to code. I wish I spoke R, the statistics language that everybody uses these days, but all of that came after me. So, you know, if I were a grad student these days, I'd be looking for portable skills and then keeping my eyes on the horizon for cool, weird opportunities that, you know, maybe you haven't even thought of yet, because that's where some of the most fertile science lives, I think.
Nice. That's awesome, and like I kind of can speak to that. I always been interested in the marine field. I love like going to the oceans, but I actually got my start in the professional world as a butterfly and habitat restoration worker with the Fish and Wildlife Service. So most of my work was in terrestrial field up until 2017, when a change of presidents led me into the National Park Service, where I got the job working at Project National Seashore, and in turn started working with sea turtles. Yeah. So it definitely wasn't on my horizon to work with sea turtles. I actually didn't think about that, because sea turtles, they live in the ocean, and I don't go on boats, or I didn't at the time. And I eventually found my way working with sea turtles, because I didn't think about they actually do come in nests. So I eventually ventured into the sea turtle world, and now I've been on boats off 20 miles off at sea as a endangered species observer. So I definitely can talk about like not sticking to your comfort zone, but getting out there and exploring what's around you.
Yeah, it's quite the adventure. I mean, if you look at you, like from butterflies to turtles, I mean, that is quite a journey. So, yeah, and I think it takes that first step of the brave plunge, right, to get
right
there. Yeah.
Right, exactly how you said, take the plunge. All right, so our last question is, how can whale shark research and conservation help like ocean species and the ocean in general?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked me that question, because it's one of my favorite things about whale sharks. We think of them as ambassador species, or sometimes umbrella species, flagship species, whatever word you want to use. It is a species that attracts a lot of attention and a lot of public interest. But if you protect that species and where it lives, you end up protecting a whole bunch of other stuff as well, stuff that people maybe don't know so much about. So, for example, a whale shark shares its habitat with the blanket octopus, one of these incredible pelagic octopus. If you've never Googled blanket octopus, have a look, you'll blow your mind. Flying squids that live in the same habitat as whale sharks. Sailfish, tuna, dolphins, turtles, all these animals share the whale shark's habitat. So if we understand the importance of that species and we protect its habitat, by proxy, we protect all these other animals as well, and you end up creating this sort of beneficial network of protection that's all focused around this one flagship animal. They did this a lot in China with the pandas, and so I like to think about the whale shark as the panda of the oceans, and if we can treat whale sharks the way China effectively recovered panda populations and all the other animals that share the bamboo forest with pandas, it's a very similar situation in the ocean for whale sharks, and so that's one of the things I love the most about them. So protecting whale sharks for their own sake is important, but you also get this beneficial umbrella protections for everything else that shares the ocean with them.
That's awesome. Thank you for that, and thank you for having us.
And it's been a pleasure.
It's nice to meet a fellow Al in person.
And I'll see you on Twitter.
So
Yes.
can you guys tell us a little bit about your path and how you ended up at the Georgia Aquarium? I guess this is for all of you guys.
I want to hear from Dayne about that one.
Okay,
Dayne.
here's my path.
Okay.
My path started in the Caribbean, in Jamaica. Studying marine biology, becoming a faculty member of the University of the West Indies. And then the opportunity came up for me to move to the US, take my family here, to work in the aquarium field as a researcher. And of course, right after that, Georgia Aquarium popped up. Georgia Aquarium wants to make more impact in the world. I want to help. So that's my path.
Okay. You guys want to answer too?
Sure, yeah. I was on a traditional academic track when I was a graduate student, and got about halfway through my PhD and thought, I don't know if I want to be an academic. And so I was starting to look for other opportunities, and that's kind of where I fell into my postdoc, which was at Disney, and I spent 2 years there learning about clinical nutrition and working with the seas and some of their animals, and then slid right into the position here at Georgia Aquarium. And I've grown, and as I said, I wear a couple of different hats here, but I've been here going on 12 years now, and I love my job. So it all worked out, even though it wasn't necessarily the path I'd laid out for myself at the front end. It definitely, those side jaunts have been worth the while. So yeah.
My path was not what I expected either. I grew up in Australia, and then I moved from Brisbane to Brooklyn in 2000. And moving to New York City in 2001 was a weird time. And you know, after 9/11 happened, and I moved into academia for a while. And then when this facility was established in 2005, I moved down shortly after that with my wife, and she and I both worked here. I still do. These days she looks after our kids, but it, like Lisa, it is not the path that I expected to follow, but I couldn't be happier. It's really been extraordinary.
That's fantastic. Wow.
And we have this awesome collection of animals to work with, and I think that's what has kept our attention all these years. So yeah,
wow.
Awesome.
I really identify with what you said, Dr. Hoops, about it not being linearly. I started grad school, finished a master's, went and worked in banking, and now I'm back in grad school, and I realize that I don't want to stay in academia, so I'm like, just give me my degree and let me go be great somewhere. So.
There
But
are
not in a bank.
lots of different
not in a bank.
lots of different opportunities out there too, and I think that's one of the exciting things, that when we come across people, they're like, oh, you get to do science with this cool collection of animals at an aquarium. And I'm like, yes, that is a thing. And so it's not always, you know, the academia or the government. There is this whole range of career potentials and organizations in between that are doing good science and good conservation. So yeah.
I mean, I consider myself very, very fortunate to have become a marine biologist, because I always wanted, as a child, to be a marine biologist. So I think it's fortunate for your childhood dream is something that you end up doing
And
for
it
a
comes
career.
to like fruition, yeah.
It might be like a path like this, you know, but you end up there, which is very, very fortunate, I think.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, you guys all make great points. It's not like a straight up and down path to your dream career, your passion. Someone said it's like a little trees. It's different rungs that lead to one place. So you don't always have to stay on that one path. You can move over. There may be like an obstacle or a detour, so you jump to the next one, but you're still going up towards your passion. So that's kind of resonates with me as I'm getting ready here to graduate, and I'm not really sure where I'm going, but I know there's not one path, but many paths that's going to lead me to the direction I want to go.
But you know, I can tell you this, there will be disappointments. There'll be some tough times, some very bad opinions of what you're doing. You have to develop that thick skin and that tolerance, and move past it, take it, let it strengthen you, and move past it. And that's how you really build that career. So it's hard, you know, being 20 years into a career, it doesn't take too much, you know, right now to get to where you want to be. But you have to get that started. You have to get it moving.
I second the thick skin thing. And when people ask me, what have I learned from studying whale sharks? There are things, life lessons from whale sharks too, right? They have the thickest skin in the animal kingdom. So they learn to defend by having a thick skin. They take it slow, like the animal lives in first gear. They're super chill. They do everything very, very relaxed fashion. They take their time and they do it right. And then they're never alone. A whale shark is never alone. They always got a cadre of hangers on. And none of us ever gets through this alone, right? So you get by with a little help from your friends and your family and your colleagues, and it takes a village. And so, yeah, those are the lessons I take from working with the world's biggest fish.
I love that.
That's good. Thank you. All right, our next question. Today we really want to talk about the aquarium and the importance, role in conservation. So now at the Georgia Aquarium and aquariums in general, why are they vital to marine conservation?
Can I take that one?
Go,
I just have to be really passionate about that particular issue. I think a lot of people, so we get more than 2.5 million guests a year here at the aquarium, but a lot of people are not aware that we're a non-profit, And a lot of people are not aware of the amount of science and conservation work that's happening behind the scenes. We need to do a better job of talking about it, and that's true. But the truth is that all modern zoos and aquariums, accredited zoos and aquariums all over the country, all over the world, exist at this intersection between entertainment, education, research, and conservation. And that nexus is really, really fertile, and they're a really unique kind of organization. Universities tend to fill that more strictly research and teaching role. Aquariums have a manifold role of research, teaching, education, and conservation. So I really like that about this facility. I like it about zoos and aquariums in general. And I really believe in the power of people creating first-person connections with animals in order to care about them and thereby protect them.
Yeah, and I'll add to that just a little bit with an example of a project that we're working on that couldn't be done without public zoos and aquariums. And that is a project that we call the STAR Project. And this is a project where we are reintroducing zebra sharks into habitat in parts of the world where they've been largely extirpated. And so how we're doing that is we're taking eggs from zoos and aquariums from genetically appropriate broodstock. We're taking those eggs, we're shipping them to Indonesia. We will rear them out in facilities there, hatcheries, and then put the animals into sea pens. We'll grow them up to a certain size. Then we're going to tag them and release them in order to reboost or restock the populations there. And that really couldn't be done without the partnership of the zoos and aquariums that are involved in this project, because it is that expertise on reproduction and the care of these animals until they get to about 70 centimeters in growth, that they bring that expertise to the table. And we couldn't do this great conservation work without that expertise. And so this is a really nice intersection of zoos and aquariums, academics, governments, and NGOs and other partnerships to get this project done.
Yeah, I mean, how cool is that?
Right?
That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. To do cool stuff like this.
Yeah. Wow.
How has science communication helped the field of marine conservation?
Great question. I think it's an important role that scientists get very little training on, right? We're taught to communicate our science to other scientists, but unless we get good at talking about the value of our science to the public, which is something we don't get a lot of training on, then you're really missing the message and sharing the benefits of your science with all. And so I think that's a skill that many of us have worked hard at, and trying to be good communicators of our science to the general public. And that's certainly what the aquarium does, right? They distill our science down to a great message that the public can take away and learn to appreciate, all these great animals in our collection and what we still need to learn about them.
Part of success in science communication is just being mindful of it, mindful that at some point you have to be able to interpret your science to somebody else who doesn't have the same lexicon that you have from grad school, right? So you have to be able to, as this says, distill it to the language that we all have, not the one that just scientists have. And once we do that, then we can share the science effectively, and people will take that message in and internalize it.
I mean, my biggest critics are my 3 daughters. They will ask me questions about science that I know really well.
And kids are ruthless.
Oh, they're ruthless, right? And then, they will ask me a question, I'm like, oh, I didn't think about it like that. Because I'm trying to explain it to them. And they ask me a question, it blows me. So that's the biggest critic. And I think they've helped me to communicate better with the general public. Scientists need to get out there. Get out of the university, get out of the lab, speak more, go on social media. Start talking about what you're doing in a way that the public can really engage with.
Okay, so what are some common misconceptions about aquariums that we can just break down right here, right now, and highlight why there is a need for aquariums and a need for the species conservation effort at aquariums?
Like what I can tell you is, right? Aquariums are such a microscope to do well and to treat animals well, even better in some instances than they enjoy in the wild. Moving birds that they would normally have in the wild, take them into the facility, really taking care of them. But on the outside,
the misconceptions are animals are in a box, in a cage, and it stops right there. And that's where the conversation stops, which is not fair. Go deeper into it, see what's happening, and the care that animals get in facilities like Georgia Aquarium is impeccable. And the power that holds in educating the public for conservation in the wild, that's amazing. And it's powerful. You have to love something to conserve it, usually. And when you fall in love with an animal here, like a Georgia Aquarium and many other aquariums around, you want to conserve it, you want to do right by that animal. And that's what the powerful thing is.
Yeah, I think if you ask many people in marine biology or marine science what sparked their interest, I think many of us will say it was visiting an aquarium as a child. And that holds value because if you see it and you hear about it, then you can conserve it, love it, just as Dayne said. So that is as added value to why we look here and have this fantastic collection to inspire and educate.
I think maybe one of the misconceptions is that you can only experience Georgia Aquarium at Georgia Aquarium. That's not true at all. We have a whole range of virtual programs, so people can have a live educator in their classroom by video link doing marine education programs. We have an outreach vehicle program where we can bring program animals to your school, and of course you can reach any of us on social media all the time. So we are not constrained by the four walls of this building at all. I mean, we love to get out there into the community and to talk more to people about the passion that we have for these
All right, so we are Black and Women in Science, a organization that's here to amplify and increase diversity into the scientific field. So what are some suggestions on how to increase diversity in the marine science field?
I'm really glad you brought that question up because it's so important. The history of public aquariums looks more like this than like this. So we have some work to do in the aquariums to increase diversity and representation. I think one of the first things we can do is to look at the way internships are structured. A lot of internships in aquariums, because people want to work with animals, they've been unpaid internships that were nonetheless really competitive because people wanted to work with animals. The truth is those two things should not be connected. The need to put food on the table should not be related to whether or not you want to do the work. So looking at the way we do internships, not just here at Georgia Aquarium, but across all zoos and aquariums, actually everybody should be looking at their internship programs. Such a key way that people get into professions, and an important first step. If you don't have equality on the starting block, how can you have equality anywhere else? So we really need to look at that first level entry into the business and how can we help people at that point so that it ends up looking like the communities that we serve and not the history.
Wow, yeah, you make a really, really key point there. There's so much wage inequality already that those unpaid internships, it's really a struggle for people from underserved communities and minoritized backgrounds to take advantage of it because they do have to put food on the table and they have other priorities. So what advice do you have for inspiring scientists looking to get into the field? I know Dr. Buddo answered this question for us earlier, so do you guys want to give it a go?
Yeah, I think grit and perseverance and passion are what are going to carry you along. And so you have to have the passion first, and then the grit and determination are going to help you along the way over what could be perceived as speed bumps. But those are all opportunities in the path, and I think I meet so many people that are like, oh, I always wanted to be a marine biologist, but there's always a but. I always wanted to be a marine biologist, and I am a marine biologist. I get to do what I love every day, and I think that is passion for it and a little bit of perseverance and grit along the way. So that's my advice.
I would encourage people to look for role models. They're out there, and you'll find role models that look like you. If that's what you. If you're a woman, you can find people like Eugenie Clark, who was one of the first and greatest shark scientists woman. I've got two role models sitting right next to me here. So there are role models out there. The aquarium here, Georgia Aquarium, has an African American president. We're the only aquarium in America that does at the moment. So he has an amazing story, like Brian Davis, and sort of looking at his history and the history of other people who found their path and they found their way in. Look at their examples and see what you can learn from that will inform your own path.
Alright, and the last question was something fun. We're on an aquarium, so what's your favorite animal here at an aquarium?
Mine is the tiger shark. I love diving with tiger sharks out in the wild. So being able to, as I mentioned earlier, get from my desk sometime, walk 2 minutes, and I can enjoy some tiger sharks and go back to my desk. That's awesome. You know, so tiger shark is definitely my favorite.
That's such a hard question to answer. But you know, when I was an undergrad, my advisor was an invertebrate biologist, and at that time I wanted to study big charismatic things like dolphins. And he just shook his head. And now, later in my career, I was like, you know, he was right. Like octopus are fascinating creatures to me, and something that I don't study and had never studied, but man, so cool. And if I ever got the chance to do a project with an octopus, I would jump on it.
Yeah, I think I'm supposed to or contractually obliged to say whale sharks.
You don't have to.
It is in your contract.
However, I do have a deep love of manta rays. They are so graceful and they're pretty clever too. They've got personality and moxie, and I really like that about them. I love it when I'm in Ocean Voyager and it suddenly gets really dark, and it's because Tallulah is this 14-foot wide, manta ray just gliding over your head. And that's what I have my moments. This is my manta rays.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with Black Marine Science today. I know you guys have got early start to your day, and you guys have got a lot more meetings to get to. So thank you on behalf of the leadership team, and we hope to continue our partnership with you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you do, and I'll see you guys on Twitter.
Yes.
Yes. See you on Twitter, indeed.